If this video showed up on your feed, then you're probably already aware that there is a vast horde of RPG tubers all out to tell you how to improve upon what's present in RPG books so that you can play a better game. My own advice leans towards digging into the theory behind the games we play, covering topics like crafting a meaningful setting, creating an effective villain, and most recently, what does it mean to be human? And while I'm proud of the advice I put out there, I know that for some people this is all just a bit much. Why talk for endless hours about all these highbrow concepts instead of just playing the damn game? Why spend time on safety tools when you could just let everyone be free with their imagination? Why take all the effort to develop a three-dimensional character with personal resonance when their entire make-believe existence could be snuffed out by one bad die roll? Well, the thing is, I completely get these questions. They are valid. And the true answer is, all of this is unnecessary to playing the game. You can just roll some dice and have a good time without listening to me or Matt Colville or Tree Ant Monk or anyone else. Thousands, if not millions, of people play D&D without ever seeing a D&D tuber or checking out a book on DMing. My entire channel is unnecessary. So why do I keep doing it? I want a better game, for me and for you. I take pride in doing a good job and making something high quality for my friends or pay-to-play clients, and I want to share what works with you guys so that you can have a good time and avoid an RPG horror story. But what defines high quality is subjective. It's going to be different for different people. There is a difference between a lowbrow Beer-and-Pretzels game and an elevated game. Let's call it wine and cheese, and ignore the fact that there's some really nice beers out there and there are some really atrocious wines. On the elevated end, you have something like Critical Role, highly theatrical and self-indulgent with an emphasis on character arcs and drama. At the bottom, you have kitchen table D&D, with little to no metagame and literary consideration, just throwing down some monsters and some dice and getting to the action. I borrow the term kitchen table gaming from Mark Rosewater, a Magic the Gathering designer. Mark talks a lot about the card game, and he repeatedly emphasizes that while the entrenched crowd of Magic fans spend thousands a year on cardboard and go to tournaments and events, the majority of Magic's market is a much broader consumer pool with less individual investment in the cards, but who still like throwing down art with numbers against each other at their kitchen table. D&D kind of works the same way. Most D&D fans only own the player's handbook and don't care about plot structure or balance. They just want to make their characters do rad shit. And there's nothing wrong with that. It is okay to just do rad shit with your friends for the sake of rad shit, and you don't have to put any more thought into it than that. But you clicked on a YouTube video about this. You are already in the minority that thinks about this game on a deeper level, and you probably ask yourself questions like, how do I make a better game for my friends? Or what do I want out of my role-playing experience? Your perfect game might not look anything like Critical Role. There's a lot of factors to consider in what your perfect game will be, but for now, let's at least get rid of this binary and instead make a spectrum. Beer and pretzels over here, wine and cheese over here. Your game will fall somewhere in the middle. To give a better example, let's put Game of Thrones Season 1 towards the wine and Season 8 towards the pretzels. Now, if you haven't seen any Game of Thrones, let me tell you that you don't have to. It is not essential fantasy consumption or required TV viewing. I won't spoil anything here, but you've probably heard that the first few seasons of the show are great, while the last few seasons really drop the ball. I'm not going to spend too much time beating that dead horse, but Game of Thrones does provide a useful example for our purposes on the game spectrum. Early Game of Thrones was beloved by so many, not only because of its genre-shattering deconstruction and twists, but because of its focus on character motivation, deep lore, and complex plot. These are all things that an elevated RPG can have. Later Game of Thrones threw a lot of this away in favor of grand spectacle, with lots of dragons and armies doing big flashy things, but all in service of a dumb plot and flanderized characters. Beer-and-Pretzels D&D is a lot like this. I don't have to know my dwarf's ideals, motivation, and family lineage. I need to know that he's a lawful good paladin and he came here to slay demons and find treasure. While it might sound like I'm condemning late-era Game of Thrones, and it is pretty unforgivably awful, the thing is that plenty of people still liked it. With all the online vitriol around it now, it's easy to forget that Season 8 raked in the ratings and won awards. I fondly remember watching Season 7 quite literally with a Beer-and-Pretzels group, and while I had a lot of problems with what was going on screen, I kept my mouth shut because all my buddies were just stoked to see John and the boys doing a big ice quest. In fact, that episode in particular is very D&D. You get the party together, explore around, and have a series of escalating combat encounters with undead minions and elites and bears and dragons. On your second viewing, it won't hold up to scrutiny, but for most people it won't matter because they're only watching it one time in the bar with their friends. With very few exceptions, you will not replay any one night of your RPG session. Your sessions exist as something ephemeral, to be experienced once by a small group before being committed to a few hastily scribbled notes for next week. Your game can fall anywhere on this spectrum and be a good time. It just depends on what kind of game you want to be in, and more importantly, what the shared experience of everyone at the table is going to look like. You may have already been considering that there's so much more to a game than falling on a spectrum between dumb fun or intellectual art. How dangerous will the combat be? Do you care about political scheming? Are you running a G-rated game for an after-school club or an X-rated game for your spicy book club? So let's actually take all of that and make something you can use in your next game. So here we have our map with our RPG soundboard. We have X-rated games versus more G-rated. If we're looking at combat difficulty, we have Meat Grinder up here and what I'm calling Smoothie Blender down here. Of course, we already have Beer-and-Pretzels and Wine and Cheese. You might have a big high intrigue game with lots of moving pieces and players, or you might just want simple quests. And finally, we have giant epic save the world adventures versus little slice of life downtime activities. I have some minis here, so we can go ahead and place them out. And what we're going to do is make a game out of this. We're going to go around the table where I would have some players right now, and everybody is going to take turns, bringing our little sliders up or down one step at a time. So if we look at our Meat Grinder scale here, maybe 2 players bring it up, 2 other players bring it down. Now we're right here, maybe on the Beer-and-Pretzels scale, everyone decides, 1, 2, 3, 4, they all want a wine and cheese game. And as you keep doing this, we will wind up with some valuable information as a DM for the kind of mix that we want to make for our players. Now, you could whip this out at session 0, but I'm actually going to recommend you wait. What I've done here is set out my preferred mix for my original song. So after a couple sessions, I can show this to my players and ask them to make the remix. They might decide that they want to turn things down to maybe a PG-13, Meat Grinder's fine, we want to play around with some local artisan brews and get a little more towards the wine and cheese, high intrigue is cool, but they would like to lean a little more towards saving the world while still having personal stakes. Now, if I can keep making tracks like this, what I'm going to wind up with is a perfect custom live album for my players. And these are not the only settings you can go for. Up here I've got raw, down here I've got homebrew. We can have a balance between a wilderness campaign and urban environments, theatrical roleplay versus text RP, an episodic approach, or a long serial narrative, a heroic genre, or grimdark. What matters most is finding what is most important to you and your characters, so I hope that you can go home and make your soundboard for whatever you want to run next game. Or you can ignore all that and just get straight to the fun part. You don't have to use my fancy methods, I just want you to have a better game and maybe think a little bit about what makes this game good to you. By the way, if you're still disappointed by Game of Thrones Season 8 and you're still waiting for the Winds of Winter, it's totally possible for you to take the helm as Dungeon Master of Westeros and let your players be Jon, Dany, Tyrion, Brienne, Arya, and Jaime. Play it out, see what happens. You don't need a multi-million-dollar budget to make a fantastic story your friends will love. It's perfectly okay to like Beer-and-Pretzels D&D. Back when I was running professional games, I had my so-called Critical Role style 2-year epic campaigns, but I also started implementing high-action one-shots called Weekend Warriors. I had players pay to play in both kinds of adventures. Both groups had fun. Some of them were the same people playing in both games and having different kinds of fun either way. Elevated D&D is neat, and if you're willing to take the plunge, I have plenty of topics you can watch more on, like this one, where I tell you my most magical D&D moment while analyzing the relationship between the game, the metagame, and real life. But if you know you like a lowbrow good time, then this is me giving you permission to stop watching me and all the other bigger D&D tubers out there and just play your game the way you and your friends like it. Whether you like episodic Beer-and-Pretzels meat grinders of classic dungeon crawls or high-intrigue slice-of-life serials, I just want you to have a great time this week with your friends. Have a Nat 20 day. Bye-bye.